The goal of a pitch is not to get a check. The goal of a pitch is not to even win people over. It's a conversation. Someone on the other side of that conversation needs to get enlisted with your idea enough to want to help you. Your story of why you're doing this business is intrinsically linked with its ability to succeed. Do not be so rational. Let yourself into the equation. Your elevator pitch should be understood by somebody that's completely not in your field. Your aunt, even your grandmother, are actually great people to role play.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. Hey guys, this is another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I am your host today, and we have one of my favorite people in the world, Ethan Mares, in the studio. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much. You're very kind. I always love our conversations, and I also love relentlessly pursuing to win.
That's outstanding. I love that. I love that too. Folks, before we get started, please don't forget, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Make sure you get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now let's get it started. I don't know if everyone that's watching this episode, listening to this episode, knows about you and your amazing pursuit. So if you can give us the high level, I would love that before we get into it.
So I've been in tech startups for about 15 years, sold a few companies. I've run on every single side of it. So I've been a founder. I've been on the corporate side doing merger and acquisition, M&A activity. Now I work as a venture partner with a fund out of New York called Fairbridge. So I've literally seen every single side of the technology startup ecosystem. I also work with the Swiss government doing startup ecosystem development in Southeastern Europe as well. So basically I've seen every aspect of startups. And the one thing that I focus on tends to be early stage. So really just starting to go, how do we find a market? What kind of experimentation and validation do we do? And the other thing, which is I think what intrigued you, was that I've been doing a lot of work on pitches for years and years and years. And actually, a lot of people call me the pitch destroyer because they come to me to destroy their version of the pitch and kind of rebuild it. So I've become kind of a global expert on how to pitch and how to structure your narrative.
I love that. I love that. So you're kind of a big deal in the pitch world. That's awesome. Let's start off really basic, okay? How would you define a pitch?
This is something that a lot of people get wrong, right? And, I have to kind of deconstruct the concept of what a pitch is. So what we mostly think when we think of startups is a pitch, and that's anywhere from a 10 to 15 slides, typically a slide deck. These days it might even be made in Canva, but it looks like a slide deck and you present it. So let's go just with that definition, right? It's very interesting. You ask people what success looks like, and success would be really well constructed, 10 slides, really hits home and tells a story. I'm going to flip that narrative for you. I'll tell you what the world's best pitch looks like and what the world's worst pitch looks like. And so the best pitch you could possibly get is you get through slide 2. I, as an investor, interrupt you. I spend the next 4 hours talking with you about your business, so long that we end up going out to a meal. We just chat and chat and chat, build a relationship. A couple weeks later, give you a check. That's a win. I'll tell you the worst side of that. You go through all 12. It's beautiful. It's brilliant. I don't say a single word. Nothing. You go through all 12. You feel really great. You nailed all your times. You did it in 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever you're trying to hit. And the only thing I say to you is, so how can I help you? Which is the worst question you can get after a pitch, because we all know how I can help you. I can write a check. I can offer an introduction. I can offer a new customer. I could offer advice. Lots of things I could offer. And so the first thing to understand is that a pitch is an invitation to a conversation. That's the actual goal. The goal of a pitch is not to get a check. The goal of a pitch is not to even win people over. It's a conversation. Someone on the other side of that conversation needs to get enlisted with your idea enough to want to help you in some meaningful capacity. If it's a customer, to use your product. If it's an investor, to write a check. If it's someone else, it's a connector, it's to connect you with someone. So that's the first thing to understand, is that a pitch is an invitation to have a conversation. If the conversation occurs, the pitch is successful. A lot of times people will do like one-pagers or even paragraph pitches to try to get somebody, to reach out to someone on LinkedIn that they haven't met before. And again, if that person says, yeah, you sound intriguing, you sound interesting, congratulations. Now, I think the activity of creating a pitch is actually quite useful because it makes you hone your narrative. It makes you really cut out all the fat, if you will. It really makes you focus. But what you're actually looking for is it's not so much narrative excellence. It's interest, engagement, and conversation. So I'll start with that. So what's interesting is, let's say you're a new person, even if you're experienced, but right, and you're like, I need to go start a pitch, and you start Googling pitches. You'll see about 17 different ways to do it. You'll see some people that say, well, the team should be first. Well, the team should be last. Well, you should barely mention the team. Any which way there is. And what you learn really quick is two things. One, there's every possible way to make a pitch. And we all have heard the story of someone that's even raised funds without a pitch deck, which is completely possible, right? So, but the two big takeaways from that is know your audience. For example, if you're applying to YC, Y Combinator, you need to use their application, their form, and appeal in whatever format that makes sense. There's a lot of VCs and accelerators that even put out there what their format is. Techstars has a certain format of pitch decks that they like. I'm not saying it's the best version. I'm just saying, like, if you're going to pitch them, they're trying to see if you can pay attention, right? And the second is do what's right for your business. The number one thing you can do for your business is to get started and get customers. Full stop.
Yeah.
After that, we build in the resources we need to take that business to the next level, which can include a pitch deck. So the way that you can start, there's so many people to mentor, hundreds or thousands of people like me. I guarantee you there's someone in your network. And what's great is someone that's already done it before, possibly raised funds or succeeded. That's a great place to start. So what I suggest is you just get started. I will say ChatGPT has made this easier than ever because you can literally put garbage in and say, I need to do a pitch deck and at least organize it and stuff like that. There are 3 absolutely critical questions you have to do in a pitch deck. And I'll say that I spend 80% of my time on the first 3 to 5 slides of a pitch deck. Everything on the back end are things like, and it sounds bad, like the financial model, it takes time to develop. It doesn't take a lot of time to explain, right? Like you'll do a lot of thinking on that, but then also team is just, is what it is. And even the planning is eventful, but there are 3 questions you have to answer that get people involved. So why this? What's the problem solution? Why this? Why do I care about this problem? Like, what is this problem solution that I'm trying to solve? Yeah. Why now? Increasingly over the last few years, why now has become the actual most important pitch deck of a pitch deck. And the reason is we live in an era of what's called combinatorial innovation. And what that means is there's been so many innovations layered on top of innovations that you can now innovate just by combining all those innovations. So very little that comes out is truly inventive, like, oh, brand new, I've never seen that before. Most of it's some sort of combination and has to do with timing. Like, there's a reason why this hasn't happened before, and there's a reason why right now is the right opportunity for this. So you have the why this, which is kind of your problem solution, why now, and the one that for some reason gets ignored a lot, why me? So you can sit there and say, podcasting's getting even more popular, but, we're using Riverside, which is great. But I'm just saying Riverside's not great. Fine for a couple of reasons. Well, there's the why this, right? Why now? Why now? Because we're living in an era of artificial intelligence and people are creating much more content. So fine. I'm not making a good argument, right? But then it's why me, which is so important because if you get people engaged in why this, why now, the next question they're going to ask is, so why you? But when someone like you, Rick, says, I'm an accomplished podcaster, I've been doing it for years and years and years, it's integral to my business, I know, understand, and eat and breathe this problem. Okay, now we're somewhere. Now someone's going to listen to the rest. But you can imagine, and I've come across this every once in a while, it's almost like a very rational argument like, I've noticed there is a problem, so I want to solve it. Gartner says it's $1 billion market. I will do this because I think I'm accomplished. Forget about it. You're never getting funded. I actually almost always try to get the founder to put their story first. There's 2 typical tropes that I work with. So the first trope, and I'm just using podcasts as an example just because it's accessible. The first trope is something like this. There's never been more podcasting ever. Unfortunately, it's not as easy to use as it could be. And this is really important because it's only going to grow over years. My name is Rick and I know podcasting and let me tell you the story. So that's the first version. It's kind of a why this, why now, me. The other trope to go is the opposite of that. Hi, I'm Rick. big part of my business is podcasting. I use it to actually generate over 50% of my leads. And lately I've seen it's not as effective anymore. So I wondered why. And then I found this, and then I found this, and I saw a great business opportunity. And that's why I'm talking to you today. So basically the first version is problem solution you, and this why you're relevant. And the second version is you, like why you care. When you connect emotionally with your audience, your likelihood of initiating a conversation, in most cases, I try to put the founder front and center.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think I would do the same thing. I would want to, if I was sitting and listening, I'd really want to understand that the founder is truly engaged, and really believes in the idea. I like what you said, thinking about it perhaps from a financial perspective. Hey, I want to tap into this billion-dollar industry. For me, I think that would be less motivating. I mean, more purpose-driven. One thing that you did, though, really well, in my opinion, is, you had the story with that. So even if I was to say, okay, here's the feature and benefits, of running a podcast, the story seems like it would be more important. The story seems as though it would be more engaging. So how do you get there?
Well, I mean, this is why I get hired. Sometimes you can, sometimes you need additional help, right? But stories and narrative, I think part of it's a mindset issue. I think anybody can tell a good story. So I'm not saying you have to bring on somebody, but I mean, I recently had an issue where these guys, it was a pitch deck and it was just very clinical. It was very sterile. And I literally beat them up and I'm like, tell me the story of the company. And they're like, well, we thought about this and completely failed. But by doing that, revealed this big opportunity. I'm like, that actually needs to be your pitch. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, that's your pitch. And they never had thought about that. So step one, if you're a storyteller, give you permission to tell the story. And the more authentic you are, the more likely you are going to get a positive response. Because remember, a pitch is an invitation to a conversation. Let me also say it slightly differently too. With very few exceptions, the most exceptional founders I found in the world, once you get them off script and conversating, they're going to blow you away. So in many cases, the pitch is just designed for someone like me to, with my VC hat, to just interrupt you, which is great because once I get you off script, you'll just go. So I'd say step one in perfecting the pitch, like make sure you get the Q&A stuff down. Use a partner, use a friend, use your other workers. When I was a founder getting ready for investors, I used to have about 150 questions in an Excel document, all sorts of different questions that I would possibly get asked, and I would literally practice so that it just became second nature. Because the more people are riveted by your emotional engagement and authenticity to answers to questions, that's what people do. When you're an early stage company, so this is pre-seed, seed, half a Series A, you're underwriting the founder in the market, which means I believe in you and I believe that you're going after a big enough target, and who knows where you're going to end up, but it'll be big enough. Series B and beyond, you're just underwriting the company. You're underwriting the metrics, the figures, and everything else. But we're talking about early stage here. That's what we're doing. It's so much about the individual story and a lot of the why questions. And so it's a weird one because what you're trying to do is you're balancing a good narrative and story and emotional engagement. But what you need is your answers need to be logical and rational. Hey, Rick, how come you're not going to the West Coast yet? That seems to be where a lot of creative people are. Well, I think logistics and distribution would be a little more difficult. Although I do have some connections, I really think that's more of a phase two, and I'm really dedicated and committed to East Coast. As an example, like that's a great answer, because it shows your thinking. So how do you get started with narrative storytelling? First of all, we in America, we are great storytellers. You've got Hollywood, you've got TV shows, you've got resources, entire ways to write stories are online. And there's so much content out there that I'm not worried. Don't be afraid. Your story of why you're doing this business is intrinsically linked with its ability to succeed. Do not be so rational. Let yourself into the equation. Most people, customers, early customers and founders, are investing in you as much as the business.
Yeah. Makes sense. That makes sense. What I feel like I didn't hear was really the target market, the ICP. Where does that fit? Or is that after the story? Is that after these first, 2 slides or whatever?
So the lesson that I learned, it's incredibly hard and took 20 years to learn, is the following. You have to know in detail where the next 6 months go. You have to know in your heart where your vision wants to go. And you need to trust to leave the middle alone. When you're at an early stage company, financial models are great, by the way. I love creating them for the sense of organization and planning you do, but they're worthless because your business is going to change so much over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months.
Yeah.
So this middle part, right? Post 6 months, between 6 months and unicorn, I almost don't care about, because if I'm trusting you, if I think you're the right founder, you'll figure it out as information reveals itself. So in terms of your specific question, ICP and market, right? Let me separate them out. In order to know what you're doing for the next 6 months, you have to have a very clear action plan. We're just starting with creatives in, I'm using a podcasting company. We're only starting with creatives in Atlanta and Florida. We'll expand out after that. That's all we're focusing on. And the way we're doing that is we're actually going to show up at these kind of events, whatever that plan is. So you do have a very specific plan. And the reason why we chose this audience is because they have the money to pay for my product and they care about it, whatever. So that's very focused. My vision is to make global podcasting so accessible that it can be done from a click of a button, whatever that means. I don't know. Doesn't matter. And the thing is, if I trust you, if I'm like, okay, that's a logical plan, I can see how you go from here in 6 months. If you hit all your targets, you'll figure out the next 6 month targets and the next 6 month targets. Yeah. There's another way that I look at it. So that's one way. So there's a second way I can look at it, which is what I call the magnitude approach of startups. And the magnitude approach is, if you remember from math class, magnitude, it's kind of like how the Richter scale works. It's like powers of 10. So 10, 100, 1,000. So I think about, okay, so if you're super early stage, you're thinking about, where are my first 10 customers coming from? And I need to be able to answer that very clearly. If I already have 10 customers, then I'm on to the next one, 100. In my world, which is more software startups, the first 10 customers tend to be from your network and just pure hustle. The first 100 customers tend to be mostly from hustle and maybe a little bit of experimentation in ads. Not very much. $50 here, $100 there. To get to 1,000, you definitely need to start experimenting with ads. Not huge amounts of money, but certainly now we're talking maybe hundreds of bucks here, hundreds of bucks there. Let's see what's testing. And of course, I don't think you get above 1,000 without either significant virality, which is where everyone's referring the product, and or heavy marketing. And so to answer your question about ICP is know where you are. I'm early stage. I'm looking for my first 10 customers and have a really good plan of who those first 10 or 100 are, depending where you are. But the thing is that's very different in startups than small business, and this is a huge separation between the two, is Jeff Busgang from Harvard describes a startup as basically a group of people in search of a business model, in search of a repeatable, scalable business model. So it's like an experimentation machine. That's very different than a small business. Like if I was a small business, I'm in Atlanta and I'm going to create a power washer. I'm going to power wash homes, right? Yeah. Good news is very clear ICPs, very clear target market. Do I drop flyers off? Do I, have her ad on the radio? Great. Side, could you make $1 million doing that business? Absolutely. Could you do well? Absolutely. Could you feed your family and live in a nice big house? Absolutely. Are you going to scale and have yacht money? No. Is that important? No. But I'm just saying this is the difference, right? On startup side, which could be unicorn, decacorn. These companies could be worth $3 trillion. I've got 3 or 4 companies now worth over $1 trillion, right? It's an experimentation machine, which means that we as investors know that, if I like you, Rick, and I like the space you're playing, I use the podcast example. I like Rick. I like the podcast market. I think there's enough play in there to be big. Maybe it should be media, not just podcasts. But I like Rick, and I like his plan. He's got a good plan to go get those first 10 customers, 15 customers. Okay, we might take a shot here. Does that make sense? Do you need to know your ICPs? Absolutely, to go of what the next steps are.
Next steps, yeah.
But startups do not have rigid business plans because the world changes so much so fast. And what I'm doing is I'm actually entrusting the founding team to basically discover new insights, data, and research and be able to incorporate them at the speed of the market to be able to capture value.
You said trust, but how do you know that that's actually going to happen? We've worked with brand new founders.
You don't. There's the power law in VC for a reason, which is out of 10 startups, we expect half to fail. We expect 4 to give okay returns, maybe my money back. And we expect 1 to hit it out of the park. That's the risk we take, right? And how do we know? It's a risk. You get to know people, and it's how you present yourself. It's those choices. The other way to think about it, to circle back, right? A pitch is an invitation to a conversation, but it's also a series of very specific choices. What you tell me how you present to me. Did you spend hours on YouTube looking up other pitches and just copy them? Did you just feel so authentic? I mean, look, I've had startup people just flat out say, like, I don't have time. I did a one pager. It's not very good. I don't have time because I'm onboarding 50 customers a week. Of course I want to talk to them. Of course I want to talk to them. Right? And I've had others that have polished their pitch deck so much to the point, but have not built their business. And you're like, come back when there's more traction. I described it as it's a dance. We as investors are doing dance with the founders, and they're doing dance with us, by the way, too. The founders need to understand they actually have the power in this equation. A fund like mine doesn't exist if nobody wants us to take their money. And if you're really good, by the way, you have a choice of investors, right? And so our job is to become the premier choice of our specific niche. In our particular case, what we invest in is called progress gaps. We believe the technological progress has far outpaced social progress, and that's created gaps. And we're backing the most exceptional founders, backing the widest progress gaps in a commercial way. So we want to be the facto of choice of any founders that's kind of playing in that space, right? But it's got to be on both sides. We're kind of doing that. But in terms of like, if you want to know, like, how do we evaluate it? It's an interesting thought, but I'll tell you, and it's going to sound less tangible, but the answer is how you answer something is almost more important than what you answer.
Yes, makes sense.
I'm not expecting you to know everything right now. I'm not expecting you to have all the answers. I look at 1,000 to 2,000 pitch decks a year. You don't. I'm not expecting that. I'm looking for two things: how you answer, and also I'm going to pick. I'm personally going to challenge. I'm going to challenge a lot, and I'm going to challenge hard. And it's not about the challenging. It's a couple of things. I'm trying to accelerate the relationship. You know, things aren't always going to be rosy between founders, and I want to know what that's going to look like. But I'm also pushing to see, when pushed, how does new information come in? What are they doing and how do they handle that situation? So, to the founders out there, honestly, role playing. I'll give you a great example of role playing that actually works really, really well. Your elevator pitch should be understood by somebody that's completely not in your field. So your aunt, even your grandmother, are actually great people to role play. Maybe you have 6 sentences. Let's just say 3 of them are more technical, but 3 of them should be understood. Your grandmother should know what you're doing in a rough way. For most businesses, not all. Very technical business, I get not, but a lot of businesses. So you have the power right now in the network that you've created, in the community that you live, to role play a lot more than you do. It feels silly at first, but man, it's so incredibly helpful, because by the time you get to someone like me or someone else or a podcast or investor, it shouldn't be the first time you get in the pitch. It should be the 1,000th time you get in the pitch. It should be an iteration. It basically is just getting better and getting better. And that's the one other thing that I'd love to give your audience: patience. When I come into a company, because I do a lot of distress situations where I come into a company and have to turn it around, the minimal time it takes to turn around a narrative is 3 months. Minimal time. Especially companies in motion.
What do you mean?
So a lot of the companies that I go into, their pitch deck is not going to attract the capital, the success, or the customers they want. The way that a lot of the core fundamentals are fine, the product is fine, just the way they're positioning, the way they're talking about themselves. And it takes about 3 months to actually restructure that narrative into such a way that generates a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement. So I'm saying, also be kind to yourself. This is a process. And in fact, the only way you get better at it is to practice. Go role play. Schedule yourself for some low stakes, quote unquote, low stakes pitches if you can. Hey, your high school wants you to pitch, you should say yes. Say yes all the time, because the only way you get better, every conversation you have, ask your friends, ask your potential mentors or people who've done it before. Hey, I just want to show you my pitch deck. The more you practice and the more feedback you get, the better off it is. Don't listen to everyone's feedback. Oh my gosh, everyone's going to give you bad feedback. But remember, you're not looking for a perfect pitch. You're looking for engagement. You're looking for interaction. You're looking for interest.
Nice. Very nice. If I was to take this same thinking and apply it to speaking engagements, right? I'm identifying, event planners, et cetera. What would you do, or what would you recommend doing differently, if anything at all? We talk about startups. We have our 3 items. Do we take that same thinking to an event planner per se?
Well, all 3 of those are important. And what's different sometimes is whether it's inbound requests are different than outbound requests, by the way. So that's very different. Some people want to kind of cut to the chase. But I have found this, why now, why me, in various forms are always really important to open a conversation. The other thing that I would always do with my team, and maybe this will help, is I always made a list of what a successful meeting, what do I want out of whatever I'm doing?
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look, there are plenty of times to be transactional. I don't have a lot of time. Someone's called me and they're transactional. There's a lot of reasons to be transactional. It literally can take only a few seconds. Sometimes bigger meetings, bigger events better. But it takes only a few seconds to say, okay, so what's a good outcome here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now think about if you did that before every sales call or every pitch call. What's a good outcome here, right? So like somebody calls up for sales. What's a good outcome here? That they agree for me to send a sales quote. That's a good outcome. Had one of these a couple weeks ago where had a guy, it was a recommendation of a friend. I really didn't like his pitch at all. And I actually told him that flat out during it. And I'm like, I already told you that I wasn't going to hire an agency for this kind of work, and you're sounding like an agency. And he self-corrected in the middle of it and offered, I actually give him a lot of credit and said, look, he's like, no skin off your back. I will offer you a quote. You can do with it what you will. If you'd like that, would you like that? And my answer was, yeah, I mean, why not, right? Why would I not accept that? And I was like, it was amazing to me to see like how I think it was a very poor, terrible pitch, but he still managed to salvage it because he got away from the pitch and engaged me in a conversation as a person.
Yeah.
The more you engage people with conversations, the better off it's going to be. And by the way, use one power that you have. You can always ask someone, hey, customer, I don't want to bore you, or event, I don't want to bore you with everything. What's most helpful for you? I'd love to tell you about us or the company. What's most helpful? 85% of the time, they're going to say, you know what? Thank you. People don't ask me that question. Actually, I'm actually quite busy today, and I'm doing such and such, and just wondering if you have the capability to do that. Congratulations. You just engaged into a conversation. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get off script. The best script in the world is the one that gets you off.
I like that. We've got to wrap up. What is the one thing, if you could, encapsulate it, what is the one thing you want people that have watched or listened to this show to be able to walk away with?
Be you. Humans want to work with, invest, buy from other humans. Your story is important. Think about the last times that you've bought especially services. Most of the time, if you really think back, it's going to be someone that says, oh, I've done this for 20 years. I've done this for 10 years. I've done this with plenty of clients your size. That's your story. You matter. You're important. And I want you to be part of the pitch. It is not a technical exercise. It is not a market analysis from MBA class. It is a human reason of why you're doing this and what you hope to get out of it. If there's one thing I want to leave the listeners with, I want you to be in the pitch.
I love that. Cool. Awesome. What's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, sign up for my newsletter at narwhal.network. Narwhal.network is great. It's probably the best way, and you could send messages through there as well. And of course, you can always look me on LinkedIn, Ethan Mayers, Mayers, and I'm happy to connect with you and see where the future goes.
Ethan, I appreciate it. Folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. Keep on winning.